Thank you. I'm glad to be here. That was very interesting. Previous presentations, especially all the concerns about AI, which are well founded, and I'll get to that later. Um, so, I'm just, as she said, I'm an instructor at a college, and I also do corporate consulting, largely on the topic of AI these days. Uh, so, what I'm going to do, I'm making a recording of this, not from Zoom, but from another application, so I get just the slides and my face. I just want you to know that if you do come off mute and talk, you'll be caught in that recording, which I'm planning to make public because this is something I often get, is the question from small business and individuals, how do I make myself more secure? And thankfully, I now have a good answer to that question, which I did not in the past. So, but first, let's, of course, the motivation, I suppose you all know, the reason everybody is so excited about cybersecurity now is because every headline is full of cybersecurity disasters. I like the XKCD cartoon that says the thing you need to understand is the reason the one thing about cybersecurity is we are all so terrible at our jobs. The situation keeps getting worse, and our security measures don't stop it. So it is like the police department during a crime wave. They just keep hiring more and more police, even though for a period of time things get worse. So as you can see, here's the healthcare data breaches over the last several years, and they just keep being more and more significant breaches. And here's the ones just from last year, the top 6 from last year, 11 million records from a Tennessee Healthcare Association because they used an external storage location used to format emails. So they were using a third-party service on the web, like most of you are, from what I'm hearing from the discussion of the previous talks, and that service got breached. And here's another one. The hackers gained access to their network, and they were in there for March, April, May, more than a month. The typical time that attackers spend inside someone's network before they notice is 9 months. And then there's ransomware, probably the biggest, most scary thing where they infect your computers and encrypt your data, but now they don't just encrypt your data, they also steal it so they can demand 2 ransoms. One to give you back the data so you can use it, and another to not sell it publicly or expose it publicly. And then there was the Move It application used to move files around that turned out to have a serious vulnerability, another ransomware attack, another attack by hackers that got in and gained control of the network, and that's just a small fraction of the breaches in healthcare last year. And then, of course, the big one that is still in progress. Change Healthcare affected almost all medical providers. They couldn't process payments for months. It has over $2 billion of costs so far and still rising. This article is only from about 2 weeks ago. And even 2 months after the attack, people are still having trouble verifying patients' insurance information. One thing that I was very surprised to see in a very recent report, again about 2 weeks ago, is finally quantification of this. For years we have said if people hack medical systems, they might actually harm or kill people, but we haven't seen that in practice. But now we have seen that in practice. The stroke code activations at hospitals close to one being ransomware doubled. The cardiac arrests also pretty much doubled, and the survival rate for out-of-hospital cardiac rates fell from 40% to 4%. Because these are things where you need urgent care, and when you try to go to the nearest hospital and they're unavailable, and you have to reroute people somewhere else, it's very serious. So, in order to protect your business, this is one important thing. At first, security may seem complicated and overwhelming, and you have to understand you don't get to a high level of security all at once, just like anything else. You make baby steps from where you are, try to get a little better, and it might perhaps comfort you to know that even if you go all the way, there's no perfect security. There are a lot of attackers, and some of them are very powerful, and you can't stop them with anything you can buy. The government, NSA, the Google, Amazon, they all get hacked, but they get hacked by powerful attackers like enemy military. If you're very weak, you can even be hacked by complete amateurs that aren't trying to do much more than just get your money. So, thankfully, the U.S. government agencies have gotten in the act, and they have given excellent, useful, practical advice for small businesses. CISA is the first one here. CISA has 4 things you can do. If you don't have any security program at all, you can start by doing these 4 things. Teach your employees about phishing. We all know it happens, I think, but you have to tell them don't click on links you see in instant messages or emails. Be aware that you might get an email from somebody you trust that will still contain a malicious attachment because maybe they got hacked, or the from address can be forged. Requires strong passwords. We've all heard this a lot, but it's amazing how many people use weak passwords. This is one of the easiest ways to get in a system. Just try all the accounts with the most common few passwords, and often you'll get in. And some say reshare a website. Yes, all the slides, all the websites are in this presentation, and you can get it here at samsclass.info. That's a common question. I see it in the chat. Good. And all the links are at the end and also at the start of each section. So yes, I very much recommend going to these websites and get the official government recommendation. This is what the businesses I consult for really like. They don't want my opinion. They want the official government opinion, which is quite reasonable. Then you can totally justify what you did, saying, I did what this authoritative agency told me to do, which is what you'd rather have than just some random guy's opinion. And multi-factor authentication is extremely useful. Having more than just a password required to log in for as many accounts as you can, this makes you much, much safer. Google switched to 100% two-factor authentication several years ago, and they said since they did that, they switched to using hardware multi-factor authentication with these YubiKeys that you plug in the USB port, and they said after they did that, successful phishing fell to 0. But you have to do it for all your accounts. And of course, update your software and your operating system, and make sure you're not using old, out-of-date equipment or out-of-date software. All of those are very easy to hack. A few years ago, I traveled to New Zealand, and I was horrified to see them selling airplane tickets on a Windows NT system, because any of my students could hack that in 5 minutes. It's out-of-date stuff, has known attacks. All right, so then if you can move beyond the initial 4 steps, then you can make a cybersecurity framework. And this comes from National Institute of Standards. And this may seem like way too much work right away, but it's worth looking at it to see what aspects of this are maybe important to you. So here's the structure of it. You have you'll guide small and medium businesses to get going in cybersecurity. So you've got the cybersecurity framework, just organize your thinking. Then you have governance, where you actually measure what you're doing in these areas and make sure it's done correctly. And then a sort of cycle of identifying threats, protecting from them, detecting when things get through your defenses, responding to that, and recovering. And so we've gone past the period of innocence when we imagined that our firewalls and antivirus were stopping all the attacks, and now we have to admit that we are not stopping everything, just like you're not stopping employee theft or employees getting sick or fires happening in buildings. You just have to accept that all your preventions don't stop these things completely, and you have to respond and detect when your defenses fail. So governing is managing these things and making sure that you're making intelligent risk decisions. You understand what your risks are to your business, your legal requirements, who will be responsible for deploying the strategy. So here's the specific functions. You identify your current risks, you implement safeguards to reduce those risks, and then you detect if you get compromised anyway, which is something you expect, and then you respond to that. You contain the incident to limit the damage and block the entry port that they came in so the person can't come in the same way, and then you restore back to normal function. So there are levels of maturity in all these activities. This is from the Cybersecurity Capability Maturity Model, again from the Department of Energy, another government agency, U.S. government agency. So again, it's a gradual process, but this capability maturity model helps you understand your posture, measure your capabilities, and it is sharing knowledge to help guide people to a more secure position. So here's the levels. At the initial level is just you do something about security, but it's not organized or a clear policy. Some says, what was that site? Here, energy.gov, a cybersecurity capability maturity model here. All right, good. And all right. And so in the initial practice, you do something, but it's not necessarily organized or repeatable or written down. Then at the second level, you actually write down the policy and support enough resources to make sure it's done consistently. And at the third level, you actually have a written policy, your personnel are trained enough to do it, You have responsibility and accountability, so people understand what their duties are, and they're, you understand what the punishments are for not doing their job. You measure your effectiveness and constantly improve your policy. That's where you'd like to be, an optimizing policy. And of course, you don't get there overnight. Here's the areas in which this applies. You have assets, your computers and data and such. You have threats, bad things that might happen. You have risk management, which is measuring quantitatively how much damage you would experience from bad things that would happen. You have a way of keeping track of who's using your systems and what they're allowed to do. You have a way to measure what's happening on your systems to see if people are doing what they shouldn't do. You have a way to respond when security incidents occur. And the one I think most important from what I'm hearing today is third-party risk management. You're trusting other people with your essential data, and you should consider how risky that is. You consider your employees' activities, and then some high-level things for the more mature programs, your architecture and program management. Now let me just briefly go through these. So assets are your informational technology and operational technology assets. You have to assess them and consider how they are. Like I say, keep them patched, keep things up to date, for example. Then you consider the threats to your business, considering who would attack it and what your important data is. And risk management is the more formal version of that, where you don't just consider scary things that might happen, but you assess how much real harm would it do and how likely is it to happen, and therefore how much is it worth investing my resources to prevent this. Access management is extremely important. This happened, I was amazed to read just a week or two ago, Disney got hacked, and someone got into their system. By the fired employee was able to still log into the system that controlled the food information about the food at the park. So they were able to erase the peanut allergy information and make other dangerous changes to it. And that should never happen. You should not have a central system with one password and many people sharing the same password. Every person should have their own separate login to do whatever they're doing. That way, when you fire them, you can stop that account and they can no longer get to anything. I'm amazed that in this day and age, Disney made that mistake. Situational awareness means you have some ability to measure the security of your business. You can know when things go wrong. One tool that's very useful here is Thinkst Canaries. Thinkst Canary tokens are free email address and web links you can put in your data, and if somebody steals your data, they'll detect somebody going there, so you'll know that somebody stole your data. It's free. It's one good thing to know. And then you should have a plan to respond when bad things happen on your network. And as I mentioned, third-party risks. A couple of things. Yeah, let me put it in the chat. That Thinkst Canaries. I'll spell it so people can see it. Thingst. Thinkst Canaries. All right. And third-party risk management. We talk is a couple of disasters happened here. Several years ago, Kaiser, the medical provider in California where I live, lost their data through this. They hired a third-party company to do data entry on medical records, and then they got an email from somebody in Pakistan saying, "You didn't pay me, I'm going to dump your records." And they said, "What are you talking about? Why are our records in Pakistan?" The company they hired, the American company, without telling Kaiser, outsourced it to some third parties in Pakistan and didn't pay them. And this is pretty terrifying. That's why if you trust someone else with your data, you need to know what are they doing with your data. How much do you really trust them? It also happened to our light rail, BART. Their customer data was compromised, not because BART got hacked, but there was a third party selling BART tickets and they got hacked. So the end result is the company was embarrassed and their business was harmed because some other company got hacked beyond their control. So if you do trust a third party, you've inherited an obligation to determine how secure they are. If you hand data to somebody else and they lose it, you're still liable for that. Why did you trust this? Yes, you are liable if your third party gets hacked, because just like you're liable if your employee does the bad thing, they say, why did you trust this party? Did you do due diligence to see what they do, their reputation, and so on? By the way, I'm not a lawyer. It's my opinion you're liable, but my opinion is not as meaningful as if I was a lawyer. Oh, I'm also supposed to mention I have no conflict of interest. I'm not here to sell you a product or anything. Yes, anyway, Then you've got to consider what your workforce does. You should, of course, be doing things like background checks on your employees and such to see if they're known to do bad things. And then you have these higher level architecture and program issues that I think are not too relevant at the level of this talk. I just wanted to bring this up since we had a big discussion of AI. I think it helps a lot to understand how AI systems work. And the Microsoft 365 Copilot is the main AI that most of my clients want. This is Microsoft's product using OpenAI, the most powerful AI that Microsoft essentially owns, an essentially very close business partnership. And what it does is they have a large language model in the cloud, which is ChatGPT, and you have all your data stored in your Microsoft cloud. You have spreadsheets and emails and Word documents and all kinds of things, and then you ask it a question like, summarize the progress on this project for the last month. It will then go to a preprocessor called Microsoft Graph that will pick out documents from all your storage that appear to be relevant and then add them to the query that goes to the cloud and then give you an answer from the cloud. Now, there are a lot of security concerns here. One is using any cloud service. Every time you use an AI in the cloud like ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, you should consider any data you sent there compromised. These large language models learn from the data you send them, and they often memorize the data you send them and then repeat it to other users, which is why they're getting sued by the New York Times and other publishers saying you're stealing our content. And if you pay for Microsoft 365 Copilot, instead of using the free version, Microsoft promises not to train their cloud model on your data, which is important, although many of my customers prefer to have everything on their own premises or in their own machine, so it's not trusting any third-party cloud service. They're just running a large language model locally. Another problem is, unless your data is accurately labeled by security, and almost nobody's data is, it might retrieve confidential information, like confidential emails about this topic, and expose them to a document that you might not realize shouldn't be sent widely. And another concern, which I think is not well understood, you need to understand artificial intelligence. Large language models do not understand anything they're doing. They do not understand English. They do not understand meaning. They don't know there is a world out there. When you ask them a question, what they've done is they have made a mathematical model of the whole internet to predict from a few words what words are coming next, just by turning them all into numbers and drawing a curve through those words in a 768-dimensional space. So this means if you ask them a question and they don't know the right answer, they have no way to know that they don't know the right answer. They will just make up an answer and it will look really good. I have a project to give my students. We build these things and attack them and defend them. And we find you can ask them a question when they don't know the answer at all, and they will make up a whole page of beautiful answer that's totally wrong. If you ask the same question again, you'll get a different, completely wrong, convincing whole page. This is an important thing to know. So you can use them to summarize your patient notes and such, but be aware that you have to review them. It's as if you had a junior trainee that had very little training preparing your document for you, a junior unskilled assistant. It's your obligation to review whatever that AI produces because it is likely to make outrageous, stupid mistakes. And you should know that. And many people have been embarrassed by trusting these things. And how secure is Google's email, sending and receiving attachments? They are automatically encrypted, and Google secures them pretty well. I'd say the only real risk is that you might send them to the wrong address. That's the biggest risk. Or they might be mishandled at the other end. And of course, in principle, Google itself could be hacked, but they do have pretty strong defenses. All right, so I think we're up to Q&A. I'm going to stop this recording.